"I'm the one who will defend my mother," said the boy to the judge, and something remarkable happened. In a family court in Springfield, Massachusetts, what seemed like an ordinary custody hearing turned into one of the most astonishing cases ever witnessed. An 8-year-old boy stunned everyone when he stood up before the judge and declared, "I will defend my mother." What looked like a child's bold outburst soon revealed itself to be a solid defense, built on evidence, arguments, and courage. This is the moving story of Ethan Miller, the boy who stood up to his own father, challenged seasoned lawyers, and forever changed the fate of his family, proving that when truth is guided by love, even the smallest voice can thunder through the halls of justice. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The Springfield Family Court was packed that morning with lawyers, social workers, a few local journalists, and curious onlookers who often attended delicate custody hearings. Judge Richard Coleman, known for his stern demeanor and intolerance for theatrics, entered the courtroom and took a seat at the bench. The murmur of voices fell silent immediately, leaving only the sound of pens clicking and pages being shuffled on the attorneys' tables. At the front sat Laura Miller, tense and visibly exhausted, and Robert Miller, wearing a smug smile as if the outcome were already decided in his favor. The custody dispute over young Ethan seemed like just another case on the docket, until, suddenly, something entirely unexpected happened. Ethan, only 8 years old, rose from his chair beside his mother, straightened his light blue dress shirt, and with a steady voice declared, "I'm my mother's lawyer." The reaction was instant. Stunned looks, muffled laughter from his father's side of the room, and a wave of silence from everyone else. Laura turned quickly, grabbing her son's arm as if to protect him from making a childish mistake. But his determined and calm expression made her hesitate to stop him. Robert, on the other hand, let out a low chuckle, whispering something to his attorney, who smirked condescendingly. The judge furrowed his brow, adjusted his glasses, and leaned forward, scrutinizing the scene. At first, he expected it to be nothing more than a child's attempt to ease the tension in the room. Yet the way Ethan held a folder of documents so firmly made it clear this was no improvised act. The boy took a deep breath and, with remarkable confidence, cited a section of Massachusetts law guaranteeing that a child has the right to be heard in custody proceedings. The entire courtroom fell into absolute silence. Even the interns stopped typing on their laptops, realizing they might be witnessing something historic. Ethan's voice never wavered, despite the enormous responsibility he was taking on in front of so many adults. He opened his folder and carefully pulled out documents, one by one. He presented school report cards, all with exemplary grades, and a letter signed by his teacher, Karen Thompson, highlighting not only his academic dedication, but also his unusual sense of maturity and responsibility for a child his age. Laura watched every move, tears welling in her eyes, torn between pride and fear of the risk her son was taking by stepping into such a challenging role. Robert muttered under his breath, trying to mask the discomfort creeping in, for he had not expected his son's actions to go beyond childish play acting. Judge Coleman called the room to order and allowed the boy to proceed, making it clear he was willing to hear him out. Ethan then turned to face his father directly, a gesture that caused murmurs among the audience, and said with striking clarity, "He doesn't want custody out of love or concern. He only wants it to control the inheritance my grandfather left me." The words echoed through the courtroom like a sharp accusation. Robert's attorney immediately stood to object, but the judge raised his hand, instructing him to remain silent for now. He wanted to hear what the child had to say. With an astonishing calmness, Ethan explained that the inheritance would only be available when he turned 18, and that his father was trying to obtain custody just to gain access to the money until then. Robert's face turned red, his once relaxed posture now showing cracks of unease. Clearly, he had not expected his son to expose such a grave truth in public to back up his claims. Ethan produced photographs of the apartment where he lived with his mother. The images, printed on glossy paper, revealed a modest but clean, organized, and welcoming home. He then presented medical records showing regular checkups and up-to-date vaccinations. The judge examined each document carefully, and with every page, his initial skepticism seemed to fade. What had begun as a surprising act from a child was steadily becoming a solid defense built on serious preparation. As each piece of evidence was presented, Lavra gripped her hands tightly in her lap, struggling to contain the emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. Meanwhile, the audience whispered in awe, many unable to believe what they were witnessing. Robert shifted uncomfortably, crossing and uncrossing his legs, while his attorney shuffled papers in vain, searching for a way to discredit the boy. When Ethan finally finished presenting the initial documents, he took a deep breath, raised his eyes to the judge once more, and formally requested the right to be heard as a legitimate party in the proceedings. Judge Coleman, who was used to seeing children in tears or withdrawn in family hearings, now faced something entirely different. Adjusting his robe, he leaned back in his chair, his expression more serious than ever, and declared that the boy would indeed be granted the floor with his testimony officially entered into the record. The announcement stirred murmurs across the room, even drawing scattered applause that was quickly silenced by the court officer. Ethan closed his folder for a moment, glanced at his mother, and gave her a brief smile, as if to say that this was only the beginning. Laura returned the smile, her heart heavy yet hopeful, realizing that amid the pain and tension, there was now a glimmer of light in that courtroom. After presenting the first set of documents in court, Ethan took a deep breath, adjusted his folder again, and announced that he had a piece of evidence that would leave no doubt about Robert's true intentions. He asked the judge for permission to play a recording he had made a few days earlier, explaining that it was of a phone conversation in which his father openly admitted that he wanted custody only to gain control of the inheritance left by his grandfather. The request sent a ripple through the courtroom. Some people whispered, others widened their eyes, while Robert, visibly nervous, jumped to his feet claiming it was illegal. Judge Coleman called for absolute silence and ordered that the recording be played. Ethan placed a small device on the table and pressed a button. Robert's voice filled the room clearly, declaring that he didn't care about his son's daily life, that all he wanted was access to the money to solve his own financial problems. The impact was immediate. The courtroom sank into utter silence, everyone processing the weight of the confession. Robert tried to fight back, raising his voice to argue that the recording was invalid because it had not been made with consent. His lawyer supported the claim, citing supposed loopholes in the law. But Ethan, maintaining the same surprising calm that had impressed everyone, asked to respond and quoted specific sections of Massachusetts law and the U.S. Constitution, reminding the court that recordings made to protect one's own rights could, in fact, be admitted as evidence. The judge, struck by the clarity of the boy's explanation, stared at him for a long moment before turning to Robert's attorney, who fell silent, realizing he had no strong counterargument. Laura, overwhelmed with emotion, covered her face. With her hand, hardly believing what she was witnessing, her 8-year-old son holding his ground against seasoned attorneys with firmness and composure. From that moment on, the entire tone of the hearing shifted. With the recording accepted as official evidence, Ethan moved on to a second folder of documents. He presented Laura's pay stubs, proving her steady income as a receptionist at a local clinic. He showed copies of messages sent to his father, pleas for help, invitations to visit his son, updates about school meetings, all left unanswered, demonstrating Robert's lack of involvement. He also submitted a statement from his pediatrician confirming regular checkups, noting his healthy development and praising his mother's dedication. The judge reviewed each piece carefully, jotting down notes, while Robert squirmed restlessly in his chair, visibly more unsettled with each passing minute. The mounting evidence was stacking heavily against him, and even his attorney's discomfort was becoming clear. Ethan then requested that their neighbor, Helen Carter, be called to the stand. The elderly woman, with a calm yet steady voice, testified that she had watched the family's routine for years. She explained that she often saw Laura leaving early for work, always ensuring Ethan was with someone trustworthy when not at school, and that she had never once seen Robert step in to provide support. Helen recalled that when Ethan had fallen sick the previous winter, it was Laura who rushed to get medicine and care for him, while Robert never even called to ask about his condition. Her words painted a picture of maternal devotion and paternal neglect. The judge thanked her and noted the significance of her testimony. Robert tried to hide his discomfort behind a forced smile, but it was obvious to everyone in the room that his image was crumbling. Still unsatisfied, Ethan asked for his teacher, Karen Thompson, to take the stand. Karen explained how the boy had prepared himself for this moment, describing the seriousness with which he studied legal articles and the maturity he showed in handling responsibilities unusual for someone so young. More than defending his mother, Ethan demonstrated the ability to grasp the gravity of the situation and respond with logic and clarity. Karen stated that she was there not only as an educator, but also as a witness to Laura's dedication and Robert's absence from his son's education. Her testimony moved many in the audience, who struggled to conceal their admiration for the boy who, instead of shrinking under pressure, stood tall against adversity. When Karen finally stepped down, silence once again blanketed the courtroom. Judge Coleman leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful, and declared firmly that every piece of evidence presented would be officially recorded and considered. Robert's attorney, unable to come up with convincing arguments, chose to remain quiet. Robert glared at his son, but not with affection, with anger, furious at being exposed so completely. Laura clenched her hands together, fighting back tears, sensing that her chances of retaining sole custody were growing stronger. Ethan, meanwhile, remained composed, standing tall and serene, fully aware that this was just one part of the battle. By now, the courtroom no longer saw him as just an 8-year-old boy. They saw someone capable of dismantling, piece by piece, the facade his father had tried so hard to maintain. When the judge asked him how he had learned so much about the law, Ethan took a deep breath, straightened his folder, and began to explain. He said it had all started weeks earlier, when he had been taken to spend a weekend at his father's place after months without any contact. Robert had shown up suddenly, wearing a forced smile, convincing Laura that he wanted to reconnect with his son. Ethan agreed, hopeful that perhaps he might finally experience a genuine moment of fatherly affection. But he quickly realized something was wrong with that visit. His father's apartment was messy, with empty bottles scattered around, and almost no space prepared for him. On Saturday night, as Ethan walked quietly down the hallway, he overheard Robert's voice on the phone, loud and careless. That was when he uncovered the real reason behind the sudden reunion. Robert was planning to seek custody, not out of love, but solely to gain control of the inheritance left by Ethan's grandfather. The words he heard that night carved themselves into his memory. Robert said that if he got custody, he could manage the money for years until Ethan came of age, and that it would be easy. Ethan froze, hidden behind the door, his heart pounding. He felt a mix of fear and crushing disappointment. After so much time without his father's presence, he had imagined the reunion might finally mean care or interest. Instead, it was only about money. He spent the entire night awake, lying on the makeshift mattress in the guest room, trying to figure out what to do. On Sunday, when Laura came to pick him up, he almost told her in the car but held back, swallowing his tears. He didn't want to frighten his mother without having something concrete to prove what he had heard. The next day at school, Ethan could barely focus on his lessons. His father's words echoed in his head again and again. When the bell rang and the other kids rushed out of the classroom, he stayed behind until the room was empty and then approached his teacher, Karen Thompson. With a shaky voice, he told her what he had overheard and explained how worried he was about the future. Karen listened intently, her expression shifting from surprise to deep concern. She told him she understood his fear, but reminded him that he would need solid proof if anyone were to take him seriously. That was when Ethan revealed that he had used a small recorder, his birthday gift, to capture part of the conversation. He handed her the device, and when Karen heard Robert's words for herself, she realized the situation was far more serious than it had appeared. Karen took a long moment before responding. She told Ethan that, despite his young age, he had the right to be heard in a custody case as long as he presented factual evidence. Anxious but determined, Ethan begged her to help him prepare because he didn't want his mother to face the battle alone. Moved by his determination, Karen agreed. She explained that they would need to organize documents, gather witnesses, and study the legal points that could support his arguments in front of the judge. So began their daily meetings after class, with Karen breaking down the most important laws in simple terms, showing him how to build a defense, and rehearsing calm responses to tough questions. Each afternoon, the classroom transformed into a makeshift law office. It was only after several days of preparation that Ethan finally told his mother the truth. Laura was stunned when she heard the recording, unable to believe what her son had done. At first, she tried to persuade him to leave everything in her hands, insisting that it wasn't a child's job to face his own father in court. But when she heard Robert's voice admitting he wanted custody just to control the inheritance, she realized she couldn't ignore it. She sat at the kitchen table, crying silently, and when she looked at Ethan, she saw that he wasn't afraid. He held her hand firmly and told her he would not let anyone tear them apart. It was then that mother and son made a pact. They would face the case together, with courage and preparation. From that night on, the Miller household was transformed. Their small kitchen filled with borrowed law books, printed state codes, and piles of documents. Karen visited almost every day to guide them. Ethan created color-coded folders, separating evidence into categories: unanswered messages, income records, medical statements, and of course, the crucial recording. He practiced his arguments in front of the mirror, learning to control his breathing and maintain composure. Laura, though still fearful, grew stronger as she watched her son's confidence. Karen, too, was deeply moved, impressed by the focus and determination of an 8-year-old. What had begun as a secret overheard in a hallway was slowly becoming a solid defense, strong enough to challenge even the adults waiting in that courtroom. From the moment they decided to face Robert in court, Karen adopted a much stricter approach. It was no longer enough to simply explain legal concepts. Ethan needed to be prepared for the real pressure of a courtroom. She turned every meeting into a simulation, sitting across from the boy as if she were a hostile attorney. She fired off quick questions, cut his answers short, threw in intimidating remarks, and even raised her voice on purpose. Each time, Ethan had to stay calm, hold eye contact, and stick to his point without losing focus. At first, he stammered, fidgeted nervously with his hands, and looked toward his mother for reassurance. But Karen reminded him that, in front of the judge, he would have to project confidence. Over time, his answers grew stronger, and Laura began to realize that her son was learning not only what to say, but how to carry himself before adults who would try to shake him. The training sessions weren't limited to regular hours. Many stretched late into the night after Laura came home exhausted from work. Still in her clinic uniform, she would sit at the kitchen table to listen to the mock trials, adding practical details that could help daily routines, household expenses, and real-life situations that showed her dedication. Ethan wrote everything down in neat notebooks, creating lists of strengths and anticipating his father's possible attacks. Karen insisted that he practice out loud because tone and confidence would matter as much as the content. At times, Laura wanted to end the practice early, worried about her son's fatigue, but Ethan pushed to continue. He didn't want to leave room for mistakes. He knew every detail could be decisive. That persistence began to impress even Karen, who saw in him a level of discipline rare for a boy his age. Despite all the effort, there were moments of vulnerability. One particularly hard night, after repeating the same answers several times, Ethan dropped his notebook and rested his head on the table. He admitted he was afraid of not being able to speak in front of his father, that his father's anger might make him forget everything he had practiced. Laura immediately went to him, embraced him, and reassured him that he didn't need to be perfect, that he had already done more than anyone could ever expect. Karen, moved, added that mistakes could happen, but the truth was his greatest weapon. Ethan listened quietly, took a deep breath, and wiped away his tears. Then he sat back up, asked to restart the simulation, and answered even more firmly than before. That ability to bounce back from his own fears was proof that, beyond knowledge, he was also building the resilience needed to face the courtroom. Another important part of the preparation was body language training. Karen explained that in front of the judge, every gesture would be noticed. She asked Ethan to keep his shoulders straight, his head held high, and to avoid fidgeting with his feet. She insisted he learn to pause before answering, because silence, when used wisely, could demonstrate control. They even created a secret code. When he placed his hand flat on the table and took a deep breath, it meant he was regaining his balance before responding. Laura watched in awe, as if her son were rehearsing for a play, but she knew there was no acting here. This was real preparation for a moment of immense importance. Little by little, Ethan mastered this too, turning nervous habits into confident posture, something that would surely unsettle his father on the day of the hearing. The kitchen calendar, hanging on the wall, was marked with a red circle for each passing day. The hearing was approaching fast, and tension in the household grew heavier. Laura started losing sleep, worried about the weight her son was carrying. She spent hours staring at the stacks of papers, wondering if it was unfair to let an 8-year-old bear so much responsibility. But whenever doubt crept in, she remembered Robert's cold, self-serving voice on the phone and knew they had no choice. Ethan, meanwhile, grew more determined with each day. He spoke of the courtroom as if it were an unavoidable mission, recited articles of law from memory, and even caught small mistakes Karen deliberately slipped in to test him. His confidence became the anchor that kept Laura steady, even when fear threatened to overwhelm her. During the final week before the hearing, the rehearsals reached their peak. Karen invited a few lawyer friends to stage a full mock trial, complete with cross-examinations and quick notes as if it were a real session. At first, Ethan was intimidated by the presence of strangers, but he quickly adapted and answered firmly, surprising even the seasoned attorneys. When the simulation ended, they admitted they had never seen a child so well prepared. Laura cried upon hearing that, realizing that all their sacrifice had been worth it. That night, when Ethan went to bed, he didn't ask for stories or toys. He simply told his mother that he was ready. Laura turned off the light, held his hand for a few minutes, and understood that, the next day, he wouldn't just be a child walking into a courtroom. He would be a defender determined to fight for truth and for the love that held them together. When Ethan finished explaining how he had learned so much about the law, The courtroom fell into absolute silence. Judge Coleman studied the boy for several long seconds, as if still trying to process the magnitude of what he had just witnessed. He had listened to evidence, witnesses, a recording, documents, and even the child's own account of how he had prepared himself. He was facing something extraordinary, and he knew he could not give a hasty response. Rising slowly, he adjusted his robe and announced that he would take a recess to review all the elements presented. He ordered everyone to remain in their places until his return. The gavel struck firmly, echoing through the chamber, and the judge left, escorted by court officers. It was at that moment that Laura finally let out the breath she had been holding, while Ethan, though visibly tired, kept a composed expression. The audience broke into whispers, and the journalists, alert and scribbling, captured every detail. During the break, reactions varied. Robert couldn't hide his irritation. He stood up, paced the floor, and muttered inaudible phrases to his attorney, who himself seemed rattled. The man who had walked into the courtroom full of confidence now had a flushed face and stiff posture, barely masking his nerves. Laura, still seated, clutched her son's hand tightly, as if afraid of letting go. Ethan glanced around, noticing the curious and admiring looks directed his way. Some whispered unbelievable, others simply shook their heads in disbelief. Karen approached her student and his mother, placing a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. The room seemed to hum with expectation, as though everyone sensed they were on the brink of a historic moment. The clock on the wall ticked heavily, each minute stretching in silence, until finally the doors swung open once more. Judge Coleman re-entered with steady steps. His expression was stern, though his gestures carried no haste. He sat down, arranged the papers before him, and called for complete silence. Gradually, the murmurs subsided, and every eye turned toward the bench. Laura's hands trembled, her heartbeat quickening. Robert folded his arms, trying to project confidence, though the tension in his eyes betrayed him. Ethan sat upright, refusing to shrink back, waiting for the decision. The judge began speaking in a deliberate tone, reminding the court that he had reviewed every document, listened to every witness, and carefully observed the behavior of all involved. He noted that it was rare to see a child express himself with such clarity, and that this alone could not be disregarded. His opening words made it clear that the resolution was near. He continued, stating that the court would not be swayed by hollow promises or assurances of material comfort. The duty of the court was to safeguard the child's well-being, and what had become evident was Laura's dedication and Robert's disinterest in participating in his son's life. He highlighted the importance of the recording, the pediatricians' statements, and the testimony of neighbors and educators. Each point was recalled with precision, and with every sentence, Robert's expression hardened further. His attorney tried to maintain composure, but the way his eyes sank to the floor betrayed defeat. Ethan pressed his lips together, bracing himself against the surge of anticipation. Beside him, Laura fought back tears, silently praying as she waited for the words that would shape their future. The judge paused, lifted his gaze to the courtroom, and delivered the decision. Custody, Judge Coleman declared, would remain solely with Laura Miller. Robert would have no visitation rights, given his history of abandonment and his attempt to manipulate the court. Furthermore, he ruled that Ethan's inheritance from his grandfather would remain under his mother's administration until he reached adulthood, ensuring the money could not be misused. The judgment fell like a heavy weight across the room, followed by a silence that lasted several seconds. Then, like a ripple, came murmurs of surprise, and even a few discreet claps, quickly silenced by officers. Robert shot to his feet, his face burning with rage, but his attorney restrained him, trying to prevent an even bigger scandal. Laura broke down in tears, clinging to her son with all her strength, while Ethan closed his eyes, feeling that every moment of preparation had been worth it. The gavel struck one last time, sealing the session. The case was settled. The boy who had stood against his own father and seasoned attorneys had prevailed. The audience, still stunned, whispered among themselves, many glancing at Ethan with admiration. Karen discreetly wiped her tears, proud to see her student rise so high. Journalists scribbled frantically, some already rushing out to call their newsrooms and break the story. Robert stormed out of the courtroom without looking back. Laura, by contrast, remained upright beside her son, holding him as if she would never let go. In that instant, Ethan no longer seemed like just an 8-year-old child. He had become a symbol that truth, when spoken with courage, has the power to change destinies. When Judge Coleman struck the gavel and left, officially closing the session, the courtroom was still buzzing with reactions and disbelief. What had begun as an ordinary custody hearing, nothing more than another case on the docket, had transformed into a spectacle of courage and an astonishing turn of events. Laura remained clinging to Ethan, tears streaming down her face, unbothered by the stares around her. Karen approached with misty eyes, gently resting her hand on the boy's shoulder and whispering that he had been extraordinary. Some of those who had witnessed everything from the very beginning stood in shock, murmuring to each other that they had never seen anything like it. That very reaction set off a chain of buzzing phones messages and calls being made straight to local newsrooms, spreading word that an 8-year-old boy had just faced his father in court and dismantled the entire case with irrefutable evidence. At the start of the hearing, not a single journalist was present. It had seemed like just another case, insignificant to anyone outside the family. But as Ethan spoke, cited laws, and presented proof, the audience realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. Someone texted a friend at a local paper. Another called a radio station, and soon the story was moving in real time. During the recess, when the judge reviewed the documents, the first reporters rushed in, followed by photographers and even TV cameras. The rumor spread quickly. A boy is defending his own mother in court. By the time Judge Coleman returned to deliver the verdict, the back of the room was crowded with journalists, their cameras ready to capture every word that would seal the Miller family's fate. Once the decision was proclaimed, the room erupted with hushed sobs, restrained applause, and whispers of disbelief. The reporters wasted no time. Microphones appeared, cameras flashed, and pens raced across notepads. Some tried to corner the judge as he exited, but officers blocked their way. Others swarmed around Ethan and Laura, still standing in the center of the courtroom. "Ethan, how did you prepare for this?" "Laura, what's your reaction right now?" The questions piled over one another, chaotic and insistent, while flashes illuminated the scene. Laura, overwhelmed and dazed by the sudden exposure, clung to her son, but Ethan, calm despite his exhaustion, lifted his gaze and answered simply, "I just did what I had to do to protect my mom." The phrase, short and unpolished, thundered through the room, silencing even the most skeptical for a brief moment. As they left the courtroom, they found the hallway packed. More people had arrived, drawn by the spreading news across radio broadcasts and social media. Onlookers crowded together to catch a glimpse of the boy Lawyer. Some waved, others whispered words of encouragement. Police officers had to create a passageway to escort the family toward the main doors, but still, they were surrounded at every step. Karen stayed close to Laura, shielding Ethan from the pressing crowd as reporters shoved microphones and recorders toward him. Despite his fatigue, the boy kept his head high, his expression steady, as though he were still standing before the judge. Outside, the scene was even more overwhelming. Television cameras were already broadcasting live, capturing the moment mother and son appeared on the courthouse steps. Lavra tried to hurry forward, but before they could reach the waiting car, more questions exploded into the air. Will you press charges against Robert for attempted fraud? Ethan, do you want to pursue a career in law when you grow up? Lavra, do you think this decision will inspire other mothers? Lavra gave no response, clinging even tighter to her son. But Ethan stopped for a brief moment, turned toward the reporters, and said, "The most important thing is that now I can keep living with my mom, and that's all I ever wanted." The crowd erupted into spontaneous applause, something rare. Outside a courthouse, Karen, fighting back a sob, was visibly moved by those words. It was clear that the boy wasn't chasing fame or recognition. What mattered to him was simple: the love and security of staying with his mother. Once inside the car, away from the chaos, silence washed over them like relief. Lavra rested her head on her son's shoulder, whispering her thanks through tears. Ethan, exhausted, closed his eyes and took a deep breath, as though the weight of the past weeks had finally been lifted. Karen watched quietly, pride swelling in her chest, aware that they had entered the courthouse as a small family fighting for survival, and had walked out as the protagonists of a story already spreading beyond Springfield. That very night, local news sites would headline, "8-year-old boy faces his father in court and wins." Within hours, the story would reach Boston, New York, and the entire country. But inside that car, none of it mattered. What mattered was that Lavra and Ethan were together, safe, and finally free to begin again in peace. The morning after the hearing, Springfield was no longer the same. Newsstands displayed newspapers with bold headlines. 8-year-old boy defeats father in court and protects his mother. Radio stations repeated the story in every bulletin, and local websites had nothing else on their front pages. Photos of Ethan, dressed in his light blue shirt and holding a folder, spread across columns under titles like "The Little Lawyer" and "The Courage That Moved the Courtroom." What had begun as a quiet family custody case was now being framed as an unprecedented event. In the early hours of the morning, neighbors knocked on Laura's door to offer words of support, while her coworkers sent messages saying how proud they were of her and her son. The case was no longer just a Miller's struggle. It was a story that had started to take on a communal dimension. As the day went on, the news quickly spread beyond Springfield. Boston newspapers, drawn to the deeply human impact of the case, dispatched teams to try to speak with the family. Regional TV stations devoted entire segments of their broadcasts to the hearing that had even surprised the court's sternest judge. The recording of Ethan's simple statement, "I just did what I had to do to protect my mom," was already circulating on television and the internet, replayed over and over as a symbol of love and courage. Reporters who had been inside the courtroom described in detail how the boy cited legal articles, dismantled his father's arguments, and moved even hardened professionals accustomed to difficult cases. Every detail was retold with enthusiasm, turning what should have been a private family matter into a media phenomenon. Social media gave the story an even wider reach. On Twitter, hashtags like #BoyLawyer and #EthanMiller trended locally and, within hours, nationwide. Cell phone videos from inside the courtroom began to circulate, showing clips of Ethan's statements and the moment the judge struck the gavel, granting Laura custody. Comments poured in. Some praised the boy's courage. Others condemned Robert's greed, while many debated children's rights in custody battles. On Facebook, groups supporting families in custody disputes shared the story as inspiration. And on Instagram, photos of mother and son embracing spread across the country. What had begun in a silent corridor was now reaching millions. Inside their small apartment, Laura could hardly believe it. Turning on the TV, she saw her son's image on different channels, replayed on loop while hosts praised his maturity. The phone rang non-stop. Neighbors, friends, distant relatives, and even strangers called to congratulate them. Some offered help, others simply said they were moved. Though grateful, Lavra also felt overwhelmed. She hadn't sought fame or attention, she had only wanted to protect her child. Ethan, sitting quietly on the couch, watched the screens with curiosity, but without vanity. When Karen asked him how it felt to see himself on TV, he answered simply, "It's strange. I just wanted my mom to stay with me." That unpretentious reply proved that, despite the spotlight, he was still just a child. It didn't take long before formal invitations began to arrive. Boston TV channels requested exclusive interviews. Local universities expressed interest in hearing the story, and even a child advocacy organization reached out to offer support. Karen, ever cautious, advised restraint. Lavra, unsure of how to respond, realized it would be impossible to completely avoid the exposure. Ethan, however, spoke with surprising clarity. He told his mother he didn't want to become a celebrity, but if sharing his story could help other children avoid this fear he had felt, then he was willing to speak. With each sentence, he revealed not only his maturity, but also the sense of purpose beginning to form inside him. By nightfall, newspapers in New York and Washington were already covering the case. Television commentators called it a portrait of the fight for justice through innocence, and debated how the ruling might set new precedents. It was clear this episode would not remain confined to Springfield or even Massachusetts. It was becoming a national example. In their apartment, Laura watched her son sleeping and wondered how such a small boy had become such a powerful symbol. To her, Ethan was still the child who loved to draw and begged for bedtime stories. But to the world, he was already the boy who had faced injustice and won. The ripple effect of his courage was only growing, and this was just the first wave of a tide that would change their lives forever. The years went by quickly, but the memory of that courtroom never left Ethan's mind. He grew up carrying not only the recollection of his victory, but also the weight of the responsibility he had felt in protecting his mother. Unlike other children his age, whose memories were filled with games, trips, and playful afternoons, Ethan's most vivid recollection was of a judge striking the gavel and confirming that he would stay with Lavra. That image served as his compass, reminding him every day that knowledge and courage were tools powerful enough to change destinies. At school, he became an even more dedicated student, standing out not only for his flawless grades, but also for his critical thinking and his willingness to help classmates in need. Teachers noted a seriousness in him that was unusual for his Asian maturity forged too early, but one that now blossomed into natural leadership among his peers. As a teenager, Ethan searched for ways to turn that experience into something greater. When he entered high school, he joined social projects focused on community assistance, beginning as a volunteer in literacy programs and initiatives supporting low-income families. It was in this context that he had his first formal contact with volunteer lawyers working in Boston's underserved neighborhoods, offering free legal guidance. Fascinated, Ethan began following them whenever he could, observing how each word, each document, could bring hope to people who had already resigned themselves to despair. The young man listened attentively, took notes, and little by little was asked to handle small tasks like organizing files, helping with registrations, and even simulating presentations during school debates. For him, every activity was another step toward a purpose that was becoming clearer by the day, dedicating his life to the law. Karen Thompson, his teacher and mentor since childhood, never left his side. Even after Ethan advanced in his studies, she insisted on following his progress, sending him books, recommending lectures, and, above all, reminding him to stay true to his essence. Karen often told him that his intelligence was remarkable, but what truly set him apart was his empathy. That quality, she said, was what made him unique: his ability to look at others and recognize their pain and needs, rather than seeing only numbers on a case file. On afternoons off, the two would meet in libraries to discuss articles and jurisprudence. And Karen was often astonished to see that, even without formal training, Ethan could already grasp complex legal issues. Laura, in turn, watched in quiet pride, grateful to see that the struggle of the past had become fuel for her son's future. During his final years of school, opportunities began to multiply. Ethan participated in debate competitions, winning many of them with his clarity and logical arguments. He was invited to speak at student conferences, where he shared his story not as an extraordinary feat, but as proof that even the youngest voices have the right to be heard. His humility was what impressed people the most. Whenever praised, he would reply that he was not a hero, just someone who did what needed to be done. This attitude caught the attention of university professors, who saw in him a rising talent. By the age of 17, when college applications began, Ethan Miller's name was already known in academic circles, not only because of his childhood case, but because of the consistent path of dedication and purpose he had built ever since. Then came the most anticipated letter. Ethan received the news that he had been accepted into Harvard Law School, a feat earned purely on merit, the result of years of discipline and relentless commitment. The moment was celebrated not only at home, but throughout the community that had followed his journey since childhood. Laura wept as she read the letter aloud, remembering the small boy who once stood up in court and now stood at the threshold of becoming a real lawyer. Karen, proud as ever, sent him a message reminding him that this was only the beginning of a greater mission. Ethan, though happy, refused to let excitement pull him away from reality. He knew that Harvard was an important step, but not the final destination. His true goal was to create a path that could benefit not only himself and his mother, but also countless families who lived through abandonment and injustice. That night, sitting at the same kitchen table where he had once rehearsed his speeches in front of a mirror, Ethan reflected on his journey. He realized his life had not been shaped by pain itself, but by what he had chosen to do with it. The Springfield courtroom had shown him early on that justice was not just an abstract concept. It was something that needed to be defended daily, in every choice and every action. From that moment forward, he resolved that his career would not be about personal achievements or academic prestige alone. It would be about creating opportunities so that other children and mothers would never face the same despair he and Laura had endured. The boy who had once astonished the courtroom was now becoming a young man with an unshakable promise to turn past pain into a legacy of hope for the future. When Ethan finally donned the black gown and received his diploma from Harvard Law School, the emotion was indescribable. Laura, seated in the audience, applauded with tears in her eyes, remembering every sleepless night, every rehearsal in front of the mirror, every battle fought years before. Karen, who had traveled especially for the ceremony, couldn't contain her pride as she watched him cross the stage with the posture of someone who was not just earning a degree, but embracing a mission. Many of his classmates already spoke of prestigious firms, million-dollar contracts, and corporate careers. Ethan, however, had another plan. He would use his education not only to prosper personally, but to bring justice to those who had never had a voice. As soon as he left the university, he decided his first step would be to open his own law office in Boston, a modest space, but enough to begin the path he had promised himself as a child. The office Ethan inaugurated quickly drew attention, not for luxury, but for philosophy. While many young attorneys sought wealthy clients, he accepted cases from ordinary families, many unable to pay. To sustain himself, he balanced a few private contracts with pro bono work, using part of his inheritance managed with discipline to fund the structure. With every case, Ethan showed the same resolve he had demonstrated at 8 years old. In court, he studied every detail, treated each client with empathy, and never failed to listen. Soon, his name began circulating among community associations and child advocacy groups. It became clear he wasn't just a young lawyer starting out. He was someone intent on transforming the system from the ground up. It was in this context that the Miller Legal Aid Institute was born, a nonprofit dedicated to providing free legal aid to families in vulnerable situations. What began with Ethan and two fellow attorneys quickly expanded. Psychologists, social workers, and even law students joined the initiative, forming a multidisciplinary network capable of handling not only custody cases, but also adoption, domestic violence, and child neglect. In no time, the Institute became a safe haven for those who previously had nowhere to turn. For Ethan, every case was a reminder of his own childhood. He knew that without support, many children's futures could be permanently altered. That was why the Institute went beyond courtroom battles. It organized lectures, workshops, and educational campaigns in schools and communities. The impact was immediate. Newspapers that had covered his story as a child once again reported on Ethan, now as a young lawyer revolutionizing free legal assistance in Massachusetts. Stories of families helped by the Institute began filling the press. Mothers who escaped abusive homes, children removed from dangerous environments, adoptions finally finalized after years of waiting. Each success reinforced the reach of Ethan and his team's work. Universities invited him to speak, while national bar associations cited the Miller Legal Aid Institute as a model to replicate. The boy lawyer from Springfield was now a professional, recognized for transforming lives on a much larger scale. As the institute grew, Ethan was invited to participate in debates and public hearings in Congress. In Washington, he championed proposals to expand free legal access for low-income families and pushed for stricter policies against child neglect. In every speech, his presence was striking. He didn't speak only as an attorney, but as someone who had personally experienced the vulnerability of a child in a custody battle. Lawmakers listened attentively, and even political opponents admitted the moral weight of his words. Ethan's story had shifted from being just a moving episode to becoming a powerful argument for concrete changes in the legal system. His voice, once confined to a Springfield courtroom, now resonated in national chambers. By the end of that decade, Ethan was no longer just a successful lawyer. He was the founder of an institution that had become a national reference, a symbol that justice could and should be accessible to all. Lavra, who followed every step with quiet pride, often said that the real triumph wasn't Harvard, nor even the courtroom victories, but the fact that her son had never forgotten where he came from and who he fought for. Karen, now retired, remained a counselor and friend, watching closely as the legacy she had helped nurture blossomed in ways she could never have imagined. Ethan, now with the maturity of adulthood, looked at all he had built and knew there was still much to be done. The boy who once stood before a judge now stood before an entire nation, carrying with him the same message. Justice and love walk hand in hand, and together they can change destinies. By the age of 28, Ethan was no longer remembered only as the boy lawyer from Springfield. He had become a recognized authority in the field of child and family rights, with the Miller Legal Aid Institute operating in several states. Across the U.S., what had once begun in a small Boston office now had branches in strategic cities, staffed by multidisciplinary teams of lawyers, psychologists, educators, and volunteers. Hundreds of families had already received free legal assistance, and thousands of children had found protection thanks to the structure Ethan had built. His story inspired young law students, recent graduates, and even seasoned professionals, who saw in him living proof that it was possible to unite career with purpose. With every new achievement, The memory of that Springfield hearing resurfaced, not as a burden, but as the starting point of a mission that had never ceased to guide him. As the Institute grew, so did international invitations. European, Latin, American, and Asian organizations sought partnerships, eager to replicate the model of free legal aid integrated with social support. Ethan began traveling frequently, lecturing at universities, participating in UN conferences, and collaborating with renowned NGOs. His innovative approach, combining legal defense with human care, was cited as an example in official reports. On children's rights, international newspapers referred to him as the lawyer who started at 8, while specialized magazines described him as one of the most influential young leaders of his generation. The Institute's impact had crossed borders, transforming into a global reference for public policies on childhood and youth. The peak of this recognition came when Ethan was invited to speak in Washington at an international event that gathered political leaders, academics, and representatives of social organizations from around the world. The auditorium was packed, with thousands waiting to hear the young lawyer who had moved the world. When he stepped onto the stage, greeted by a standing ovation, Ethan carried himself with the same calm that had defined him since childhood. He began by recalling how, years earlier, he had been nothing more than a scared child trying to protect his mother in an ordinary courtroom. He said there had been no heroes in that story, only people who chose not to remain silent in the face of injustice. He emphasized that true justice does not arise from codes or courts, but from love and the courage to defend those we cherish. Each sentence resonated deeply in the audience, which listened in reverent silence, absorbing every word as if it were a manifesto. Among the crowd, seated in the front row, Lavra listened with tears in her eyes. For her, the scene was almost unreal. Watching her son, who once at 8 years old had stood before Judge Coleman, now speaking before world leaders. She recalled every detail of the past. The night Ethan came home from his father's with the secret recording, the long hours of study in their cramped kitchen, the rehearsals in front of the mirror, the tension of the hearing, and finally, the tight embrace when the judge struck the gavel. All of that journey seemed to condense into the present moment, as her son showed the world that a family's pain could transform into strength for thousands. Karen, now elderly, was also there as an honored guest, proud to have helped plant the seed of that journey. Ethan's speech continued, weaving not only personal memories, but also concrete proposals, expanding family support policies, investing in legal education for children, and fostering international cooperation in defense of childhood. At the end, he paused, looked out at the audience, and said, "The greatest victory of my life wasn't in the Springfield courtroom. It was realizing that knowledge and empathy together can change destinies. It was understanding that justice is only true when it's born from love." Applause erupted instantly, swelling into a standing ovation. Some cried, others clapped with all their strength, and everyone understood that they weren't simply in the presence of a lawyer, but of a leader who had transformed his personal story into a collective legacy. In that moment, Ethan felt the circle complete. The boy who had once stunned the courtroom with courage was now inspiring the entire world with his message. After the ceremony, Lavra embraced him, repeating that she was proud not only of the lawyer he had become, but of the compassionate, principled human being he had always been. Karen, moved, told him that his story was only just beginning, that there were generations yet to be touched. Ethan smiled, fully aware that the road ahead would still be long, but certain that his mission was clear: to ensure no child went unheard, that no mother fought alone, and that justice became a true right for all. That was his legacy, not just a life of victories, but a life dedicated to multiplying hope. The end. So, what did you think of this story? Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to keep enjoying stories like this one. See you next time.